Isabella had always believed in love, the kind that sweeps you off your feet, the kind that makes your heart race and your soul surrender. But she never imagined that love would become the very thing that tore her apart. Isabella is the only child of her parents and the heiress to Lawson Enterprises. She grew up in luxury, shaded from the struggles of the world. After graduating, she joined her father's company, eager to prove herself. That was where she met Daniel. Daniel was different. He wasn't just handsome. He had a quiet intensity that drew her in. He worked in the finance department, always so serious. Yet, when he smiled at her, it was like the sun breaking through a storm. At first, their interactions were professional, then friendly, and before you knew it, Isabella was falling for him. But something was off. At night, Isabella would receive anonymous texts, cold, cruel messages filled with threats. Your family will pay for what they did. Your father destroyed a life. Now, it is turn to suffer. Yet Daniel was always there, comforting her, holding her, telling her everything will be okay. She should have questioned it. She should have seen the signs. But love blinded her. One evening, after another terrifying message, she broke down in Daniel's arms. "Someone is tormenting me," she whispered. "I don't feel safe." His grip tightened around her. "We will go to the police tomorrow," he said, his voice so steady, so assuring, and he went with her. As they sat in the police station, recounting the anonymous threats, Daniel was right beside her. His finger laced hers. She felt protected. She felt safe. She had no idea she was holding hands with the devil. Daniel was her safe place. Even in the midst of her fears, his presence calmed her. She held onto him like he was her anchor. Never realized he was the very storm threatening to pull her under. The day they went to the police station, she was terrified. She clung to his hand as she explained the threatening messages to the officers. Her father was a powerful man, but even power couldn't shield her from an invisible enemy who hated them this much, who wanted her to suffer. Daniel sat beside her, his fingers warmed against hers, his grip firm. She didn't know then that the man she trusted was the one she should have feared the most. The threats continued. The messages became bolder. They no longer hide behind vague words. "Your father will pay in blood. You are nothing but a pawn," just like he was. Each time she received it, Daniel was there to hold her, to reassure her. But what she didn't see was the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands coiled into fists when she sobbed in his arms. Then came the night that changed everything. Isabella was alone in her apartment when she heard a noise. A shadow moved across the window, and her heart nearly stopped. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her phone, dialing the only number she trusted. "Daniel, please," she whispered. "Someone is outside. I think they are trying to get in." "Lock the doors," he said immediately. His voice was tense, urgent. "I am coming." Minutes felt like hours as she sat in the darkness waiting. Her breathing was shallow, fear gripping her chest. Then the door burst open, not from an intruder but from Daniel. His eyes burned with something raw, something she couldn't place. He checked every room, every window, before turning back to her. "You are safe now." She collapsed into his arms, her body shaking. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why is this happening to me?" His hands tightened around her. "Because of your father," he said, his voice almost too low to hear. "Someone wants revenge." She pulled back, staring up at him. But my father wasn't a bad man. Daniel didn't speak, just held her. And for the first time, something about him felt off. Something in his silence unsettled her. She should have listened to her instincts. She should have questioned the way his eyes darkened, the way his hands trembled when he held her. But she didn't, because she was in love. And love makes fools of us all. Days passed, but the fear never left her. She became a prisoner of her own life, constantly looking over her shoulders, jumping at every sound. The police had no leads. Her father assured her that his security team was working on it, but she saw the worries in her father's eyes. And through it all, Daniel was there. He never left her side. He checked on her every morning, drove her home every evening, held her when she had nightmares. He was her safe place until he wasn't. One evening, she decided she needed a break. She convinced Daniel to take her out for dinner. hoping that that night, away from her fears, will help her feel normal again. He was hesitant at first, but eventually he agreed. They went to a quiet restaurant by the waterfront, the kind of place that felt private, almost intimate. She laughed for the first time in weeks, feeling the weight on her chest, but then something strange happened. As they ate, she caught Daniel staring at her, his expression unreadable. There was something dark in his eyes, something painful. "What is it?" she asked. For a moment, he said nothing. Then finally, he exhaled. "Do you ever wonder if people aren't who they seem?" She frowned. "What do you mean?" "Like, what if someone you trusted was the one hurting you?" A chill ran down her spine. "Why would you say that?" He shook his head, forcing a smile. "Forget it. It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. Something was wrong. That night she couldn't sleep. His words replayed in her mind, over and over. What did he mean? Why would he say something like that? She picked up her phone, scrolling through the threatening messages again. Her fingers trembled as she read them. "You are nothing but a pawn. Your father will pay in blood." And then she saw it. A tiny detail she had overlooked before. The way certain words were phrased. The way the tone shifted between anger and something almost regretful. She knew that voice. Her stomach twisted. Her heart pounded in her chest. No, it couldn't be. She grabbed her phone and dialed Daniel's number. It rang once before he answered. "Isabella." Like I had just waken him up. "Tell me the truth." Her voice was barely a whisper. There was a long silence. "Isabella, what are you talking about?" "The messages," she choked out. "It's you, isn't it?" Silence. Then finally he sighed. And when he spoke again, his voice was different. His voice was different, calm, cold. Yes, she felt her knees buckle. She had to grab the edge of her bed to keep herself from falling. "Why?" Her voice broke. "Why would you do this to me?" "Because," he said, his voice almost emotionless, "I hate your family." Her word shattered. The man she loved, the man she trusted more than anything, was the same person who had been tormenting her, and she had never seen it coming. She couldn't breathe. Daniel's confession echoed in her mind, each word cutting open like a blade. "I hate your family." This had to be a nightmare. The same man who heard her when she cried, who protected her, who kissed her like she was his word, was the one destroying her. "Isabella," his voice softened, but that only made it worse. "I need you to understand. Your father ruined my life. You ruined my father's life." She held the phone so tightly, her fingers ached. "My father is not a bad man," she whispered, her voice shaking. A bitter laugh came from the other end of the line. "Of course you say that. You grew up in a mansion, never lacking anything. Do you know what it's like to watch your father waste away, drowning in debt because of a man who was supposed to be his friend?" Pain wrapped around her heart like a vice. "So this was all a lie." Her voice cracked. "Every moment we spent together, every time you touched me, kissed me, it was all part of your plan." Then finally he said, "No." She squeezed her eyes shut as tears burned behind her lips. "Then why?" Her voice broke. "Why would you hurt me like this?" Daniel sighed heavily, and for the first time, she heard something raw in his voice. "Because I didn't expect to love you." Her breath hinged. Love? No. He didn't get to pretend this was nothing but a cruelty. She wanted to scream at him, to hate him, but all she could do was sob into the phone. "Stay far away from me, Daniel." She hung up before he could say another word, but she knew it wasn't over. It was only the beginning. She couldn't tell her father. Not yet. She needed time to process the betrayal, to understand how she had let herself fall so deeply into the arms of a man who wanted to destroy her. But Daniel wasn't done with her. The next morning, she walked into the office, her heart in her throat. She told herself, I could handle this, that she could pretend he didn't exist. But then she saw him. He stood by her office door, waiting. His usual calm demeanor was gone. His eyes were stormy, his jaw tight. She tried to walk past him, but he stepped in front of her. "We need to talk." "There is nothing to talk about." She forced her voice to stay steady. He exhaled, looking almost desperate. "You know the truth now. You know why I did this. But I need you to know that what I felt for you was real." She laughed bitterly, but it sounded more like a broken sob. Really? She whispered. You tormented me, Daniel. You made me feel safe. Why you were the one tearing me apart? And now you want me to believe you actually care. I don't care. His voice was firm, almost pleading. I didn't plan to fall in love with you. Love, that word again. She swallowed the lump in her throat. You don't get to love me, she said, her voice trembling. Not after what you did. He took a step closer, his expression unreadable. Then hate me, but don't pretend what we had wasn't real. She wanted to hit him. She wanted to kiss him. She wanted to scream. Instead, she whispered,